It's the afternoon edition of the Weather Xtreme video for Wednesday, the 2nd of October. A lot of questions about the weekend. So many outdoor activities are planned. We got a tropical system involved, a cold front coming in. We'll do our best to answer all of those questions here as we go along. But let's begin with the weather right now. Let's look out the window with our Skycam network. Some clouds around today, but the weather, as expected, is dry. That's the Birmingham Skycam. Some mid and high-level clouds overhead, but no rain around here. There's the Fayette Skycam, very similar sky there up in northwest Alabama. And that's the camera we'll be watching carefully this weekend. That's the camera we have on top of the Phoenix All Suites, right by the hangout at Gulf Shores. The sky down there partially sunny this afternoon. They will see increasing wind and rain as the weekend begins on Saturday. But how much wind and rain all depends on the track of an incoming tropical weather system that we'll talk about in detail. There's the water vapor satellite view. We've got a big trough coming into the northwest, and that's going to pick up that system that's over the Caribbean and pull it north and make for a fun forecast here across the southeastern states this weekend. At trough back in the northwest will also set up the first big snow of the season for states like Wyoming and South Dakota. Temperatures this afternoon mostly low to mid-80s. We'll see numbers like that tomorrow and Friday. Got winter storm watches up for parts of Wyoming and Colorado and Montana, and we'll see those spreading over into parts of Nebraska and South Dakota soon, as they could be buried. In fact, this is model output for the snow out there. This is the projected snow depth in coming days, and you can see we're talking over a foot of snow here if this verifies. Over a pretty good chunk of South Dakota, down into parts of western Nebraska and Montana. That's pretty early in the season for that, but it can happen here in early October. Now, in the warm sector, we'll have to watch for some severe weather. Now, just for the rest of today and tonight, no formal risks, just a 5% severe weather chance out there across the Corn Belt. Tomorrow, the standard slight risk for parts of Nebraska and Iowa. Tomorrow's going to be one of those days where you'll have the chance of severe weather in the eastern part of Nebraska and snow developing in the western part. This is day 3 on Friday. The standard slight risk from parts of Oklahoma up into the upper Midwest, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Madison, Wisconsin, Des Moines. There's an enhanced probability over parts of Iowa and Minnesota. There could be a few tornadoes in that region Friday evening. Now, here's the rain. This is going to be a map that's very hard to draw with the unknown being this tropical system. I fully expect this map to change. The guys at HPC, or I should say WPC, they changed the name of the branch up there, the Weather Prediction Center. Used to be the Hydro-Meteorological Prediction Center. Whatever. They've got a bullseye south of Dauphin Island at 6.2 inches. Gut feeling says they're going to have to pull that heavier rain axis farther east with time. I really think the heaviest rain from this tropical system will be over southeast Alabama, Georgia, and the Carolinas. Maybe south and east of where we are. But again, we'll talk about that as we go. There's the big picture in the tropics. The guys at NHC have the system in the Caribbean now with a 70% chance of becoming a depression or a storm soon, which it looks very healthy on the satellite imagery. We've got Jerry out there in the middle of the Atlantic, the tropical storm, and again, that's moving northeast, and that might affect the Azores as a weakening depression this weekend, but this is the one we're watching. Potential tropical storm Karen. There is an Air Force hurricane hunter in there now. They have not found a closed low-level circulation at this point. We'll know probably by the time you watch this. Just check the blog. We'll have the updates if they upgrade this to a depression. The modeling has not changed a lot. This is the 12Z plots, and the consensus has this thing kind of running up toward Gulf Shores or Pensacola. Let's go to the Google Earth view of this, and you can see that most of the models are clustered somewhere between Dauphin Island and Destin. And then the center of circulation coming up toward Montgomery and Atlanta. And remember, in almost every case, the heaviest rain, the most widespread rain, the greatest chance of flooding will be along and east of those lines, which means we would be on the drier side of the circulation. And again, clearly, let's say there's a chance of rain for everybody this weekend, but the really big tropical soakers should be along and east of the circulation center with this potential tropical storm Karen. I would say the bigger rains would be for places like Troy, Dothan, perhaps Auburn. That's going to be a close call Saturday night. We'll talk about the football weather as we go. Then up into Macon, Georgia, Augusta, then ultimately Columbia, South Carolina, places like that. But remember, we still don't have a well-defined low-level circulation center, so the model initialization is just not that good. This could change. It's still early in the game, and there's still going to be a lot of questions we can't answer. We're just giving you what we think will happen now based on what we've got. Here's the intensity guidance. Most all models bring it up to tropical storm strength in about 24 hours. None of them develop it into a hurricane. We note that. And again, I think that's the correct call. I think the main threat with this thing will be just a lot of rain, maybe some flooding, rough surf. And then once it gets inland, of course, the thing weakens. But again, if it gets the name will be Karen. Let's do some detailed model work here. This is the GFS, the Global Forecast System. This is the primary American global model, valid at 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, Central Time. And this is at about 18 to 20,000 feet where the pressure is a constant at 500 millibars. You can see the big trough out in the west. And down below that, we should stay dry, partly sunny. And the chance of rain technically is not zero, but so small we're not going to mention it. You can see our tropical system coming up in the southern Gulf. Friday, that's an interesting look right there. Look at that low in around Goodland, Kansas. I mean, if it's cold enough, it's a close call for the depth of the cold air out there, but that could be a blizzard for parts of Wyoming and maybe western Nebraska and South Dakota. Thickness values are marginal. Some of that could be falling in the form of rain, but that's a very interesting forecast scenario for those guys. And the big trough responsible for that will be pulling the tropical system up, and you can see what should be Tropical Storm Karen in midday Friday south of Mobile Bay. Now, this is Saturday. This back in the upper levels. You can see the big trough west of the state. And again, that's going to pull the tropical system on up in here. There's the surface chart, and this is valid Saturday afternoon, 1 o'clock. Deep surface low south of Minneapolis-St. Paul with a trailing front. We've got the tropical system south of Pensacola in the Gulf. But notice that Alabama looks dry here. And the GFS has been very persistent in this idea of a dry day Saturday, despite the tropical system to the south and a cold front to the west. The cold front from near Columbia, Missouri, down to about Dallas-Fort Worth. And quite frankly, it's not that active with rain. So there's a reasonable chance we get in the day Saturday dry for a pretty good chunk of north and central Alabama. I think for the Alabama football game in Tuscaloosa, a decent chance. No promises here, but a decent chance the game could go on with no rain. Homecoming parade Saturday morning could happen with no rain. So that's good news. But let's look at some of the other models. We like to do that. This is the Hurricane Wharf, valid Saturday afternoon at 4 o'clock. It brings in the system near Destin, Fort Walton Beach, Florida, as a tropical storm. This is the GFDL, and it's an outlier. It's a lot faster. This thing brings it up toward Dauphin Island Friday evening at about 7 o'clock. In fact, this is valid at 7 o'clock. The 10-meter wind is 59 knots, and again, that's a tropical storm. So it's faster and a little farther west than some models. Now, this is the RPM. It's an outlier. We reject this solution. It's got this thing coming up on the Louisiana coast. That's an outlier way to the west. But again, I think the idea of this thing coming in around Gulf Shores, Pensacola, that would be right. And remember, this will not be a hurricane. This is, there's going to be some wind and a whole lot of rain here. I don't think there'll be a lot of structural damage with this. Flooding is the main concern along and to the right of the circulation center. This is Saturday night, just after midnight, 1 a.m. Sunday. And the GFS wants to bring this thing up toward Panama City. And remember, the west side is the dry side. The east side is the wet side. So if by chance this is right, the big rains and maybe flooding issues would be for Panama City and Apalachicola, with maybe not as much rain for Gulf Shores and Pensacola. But the GFS wants to be a little outlier to the east. But remember, we're just playing games now. We don't have a well-defined low-level circulation center. The models are not initialized very well. The accuracy will improve dramatically tomorrow as we got Hurricane Hunter data now coming in, and we'll know much more about this. So tomorrow morning when I do this update, the confidence will be much higher. But again, notice there's really not much rain across the state Saturday night. And if this is right, there would be no rain for the Auburn-Ole Miss game. I think you have to mention a chance of rain for that game out of respect to other models that are faster and farther west. How much rain depends on the strength and the track of this thing. So if you're going to the Auburn game, I'd take the rain gear Saturday evening in Auburn. Maybe you'll get away with no rain like this, but I don't know. I think that's an outside chance. For the Alabama game early in the day, their homecoming game, yes, a pretty good chance that game will be dry. But even then, no promises. This is Sunday at 1 o'clock. The thing is inland. Oh, it's around Defuniak Springs, Florida, below Dothan. And the front is very inactive. I mean, this is showing very little rain on that front coming in here, and it's very slow. Let's go to Sunday night. This is just after midnight Sunday night, 1 a.m. Monday. And still hardly any rain here for this part of the state. I mean, the GFS is trying to tell us, despite a tropical storm coming in south of here and a cold front coming in, it's not going to rain that much this weekend. And there's Monday, maybe a lingering shower over East Alabama Monday morning, but the big mess is on out of here with the tropical system inland over South Carolina. And accordingly, this is the projected rain through early next week off the GFS. And notice that minimum right over much of Alabama. I mean, hardly anything at all for Birmingham and Tuscaloosa and Montgomery and places like that. The big rains, Dothan over to Valdosta, then curving up toward Augusta, Greenville, South Carolina, up into North Carolina. You can see that strip of the red in through there. So, but again, I am not saying this dry solution is correct. It's just an idea that's on the table. We will have a much better defined idea of this thing tomorrow, what it's going to do. Tuesday, it's going to feel good. I think we'll get down in the 40s. Same thing Wednesday. We'll start the day probably upper 40s. The afternoon high should be in the 70s. Absolutely gorgeous with low relative humidity. That's it for the Weather Xtreme video today. We'll have notes on the blog. Next video here by tomorrow morning at 7. And if you can, catch us on ABC 3340 News this evening on the live stream of the television side at 4, 5, 6, and 10. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful evening, and God bless.